So more steps to escalation. As the world's largest army is unleashed, China fires missiles as 4,000 bases prepare for combat. China has launched an onslaught of missiles in a brazen display of its military firepower amid unprecedented nationwide war drills at 4,000 army bases. Here we have President Xi Jinping speaking to the People Liberation.
向全军发布训令。
我命令全军各级要强化练兵备战鲜明导向，坚定不移把军事训练摆在战略位置，作为中心工作，抓住不放，抓出成效。要坚持领导带头，以上率下，坚持实战实训，连战连训，坚持按纲施训，从严治训。
So that was Xi Jinping talking to his military, basically telling them to prepare for war and be ready at all times. The missiles that they fired are believed to be short-range medium cruise missiles, DF-11s and DF-16s, that can travel up to 1,000 kilometers. Personally, I think that's kind of like the perfect range for striking targets within South Korea, Japan, South China Sea, pretty much locally in terms of missile range. And China's military published image and footage of the missile tests on Tuesday, but did not specify where or when the launches took place. And they, meanwhile, at more than 4,000 military bases across the nation, thousands of PLA soldiers are taking part in realistic combat exercises on the orders of Chinese President Xi Jinping. And then you have South Korea also kind of preparing, and this is going on while they're having talks with North Korea about attending the Winter Olympics. So images have been captured of South Korea's military preparing for conflict, and amid concern, Pyongyang is preparing a fresh missile launch. Troops and K-55 self-propelled howitzers, which can take out nuclear shells, have also been spotted near the North Korea border zone. Despite the large number of tanks on the move, Seoul has claimed the show of power is simply routine, but satellite images of its warmongering neighbour's launch site appear to show Pyongyang is gearing up for a new blast. It comes despite both states agreeing to hold talks next week over Kim Jong-un's nuclear dream. Kim said he was ready to talk in a New Year's speech to his hermit state this week, but the US and Japan have both warned the regime could be bluffing as it pursues its goal of nuclear weapons. A meeting between officials from the North and South will take place on Tuesday, the first such sit-down for 2 years, and obviously that's already happened, and we know that, as far as we know, North Korea will be sending a delegation to this Winter Olympics. No telling if anything's going to happen before then. We do, as I'm reading this report, have South Korean tanks moving to the North Korean border. China President Xi Jinping telling his military to be ready for war at all times. And as I reported in the second to last video about the, or rather the last video, second to last, about the USS Carl Vinson heading over there again. It was over there last year in June, and it's going over there again. And I've already talked about what I think in relation to that. In addition to China preparing and South Korea preparing, we have America's own CDC preparing the possibility of a nuclear explosion nationwide. So the Center for Disease Control said a national panel was meeting imminently to discuss preparations that needed to be made in the case of an apocalyptic nuclear blast. This announcement comes just days after US President Donald Trump bragged about the effectiveness of his nuclear button in response to North Korean provocation. The public forum is scheduled to take place on January the 16th, and that's one day before January the 17th, which I've talked about as well in a previous video, will address planning and preparations for the country in the event of a nuclear strike. Former Vice President Joe Biden said in recent days that the US has never been closer to nuclear war with North Korea. The report goes on to say the CDC spokesperson said a nuclear detonation would have devastating results and there would be limited time to take critical protection steps. Despite the fear surrounding such an event, planning and preparation can lessen deaths and illnesses. The agency admits most people don't realize that sheltering in place for at least 24 hours is crucial to saving lives and reducing exposure to radiation. President Trump and the North Korean regime have been engaged in an escalating battle of threats and a war of words over nuclear confrontation. Kim Jong-un has even claimed that a nuclear bomb in his country can now easily reach Washington, D.C. In response, Mr. Trump has threatened to totally destroy the country with a population of 25 million people. Now, that's all going on, and it's kind of leading on to the next report, which kind of suggests that it seems all along, for me anyway, that Donald Trump has been, since he's come into office, he's been crucial in escalating tensions in a number of areas. And that obviously includes North Korea with the military drills and the rhetoric coming out on Twitter and stuff like that. And with Iran by not certifying the Iran nuclear deal, and in the Middle East, obviously declaring Jerusalem Israel's capital. And it just seems that it's part of his strategy, or whoever's strategy he is fulfilling, because it's just chaos. And obviously we know that their order is to come out of chaos, which is what they're setting up all these pieces to create. And because it's in the news every day and we're seeing it every day, it's just like it doesn't really take hold on how devastating this could all be, and that their plans are coming to fruition. So President Donald Trump is considering a military strike against North Korea that his advisors hope somehow wouldn't lead to war. It's called the Bloody Nose, as you may have heard about this operation already. And it's based off the idea that if America launched a limited military strike against North Korea, say by attacking one of their facilities, they could deter North Korea from further provocation behavior without sparking a fully fledged war. The risk here is that if North Korea does retaliate after such a strike, anywhere between tens of thousands and millions of South Koreans would die, as well as a significant number of Americans. Trump's approach, called Twitter diplomacy by some, has been panned. Jamie Fly, a foreign policy expert with the German Marshall Fund, told Salon in November that the Trump administration's approach has been ramping up the pressure on North Korea, but whether or not it will bear fruit is a different story. National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster is the main proponent of military options for dealing with North Korea within the Trump White House. But there's another wing, which is led by Rex Tillerson and James Mattis, and they urge the president to continue with diplomatic approaches. But as I reported in another video, can't remember which one now, they're looking to replace Rex Tillerson with H.R. McMaster. And obviously if they do that, then war is pretty much, it feels inevitable anyway, but it would be even more so with someone who takes such a hard line against North Korea stepping into the position of state secretary. It wouldn't be good. One of the main variables making it difficult for the Trump administration to decide on a final policy is the president's own habit of going off script and engaging in provocations himself. As a foreign policy expert told the Journal, Trump's tweets about having a bigger nuclear button than Kim Jong-un was the equivalent of waving a red flag before a bull. The talks of striking North Korea are occurring even though that country has recently opened dialogue with South Korea for the first time in 2 years. This is according to the BBC. This includes an announcement that North Korea could send a team of athletes, cheerleaders and officials to the upcoming Winter Olympics in Pyeongchang. And that leads into the last report I've got for you, which is basically this whole escalation in all these different regions appears to be pitting North Korea, Russia, China, Iran and various other little countries against the USA. And though the USA has allies, it has done nothing to strengthen those relationships since Donald Trump has come into office. If anything, it's deteriorated with the DACA and obviously the Russia investigation, and withdrawing from the Paris Climate Agreement, and withdrawing from the Iran nuclear deal, withdrawing from UNESCO, criticizing the spending in NATO, criticizing the EU. All these things is not strengthening the relationships between the allies. And obviously I can't speak on behalf of my country, and I can't speak on behalf of the rest of the world, but I can look at the behavior of Donald Trump and I can say that it doesn't appear that he's got many friends, even in his own administration. I've been hearing all these things contained in the Fire and Fury book, and while I believe that some of it would be treated on an escalated level to make it look as bad as possible, there's always grains of truth to be found. And, even if only half of his administration are saying some of the things that I'm hearing, it doesn't bode well for Trump himself. He seems to be kind of backed into a corner, really. And I can't say he hasn't put himself there. Even if he did, he's being helped to stay there, by the Democrats and by people that oppose him, even in the Republican Party. So, getting into politics talk, I don't really want to get into that, but just wanted to play this video as the last thing.
First of all, to try to deter the U.S. with, this thing about, in the New Year's address about the button on my desk, we can reach the entire U.S. mainland. That's deterrence. What they're saying is, don't attack me. The other thing that's going to happen, though, is that China's not going to let that occur. In August, Beijing signaled that if the U.S. attacked first, China was going to come in on North Korea's side. That could take many forms. So, for instance, if we strike North Korea first, you could see China cause trouble in the South China Sea. You could see the Russians go after the Baltics. The Iranians will do something. So we could see Asia really being...
That sounds like a world war, the way you just described it.
It's close. It's Asia being embroiled on both sides. And so this thing could spread very fast. And that's the real danger here. When you have Senator Lindsey Graham saying, if there are deaths, they're only going to be over there. Well, that's one scenario. But another scenario is that this just spreads, and it even spread to the U.S. homeland because the Chinese and the Russians could actually get into a nuclear exchange with the United States. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I'm saying that's a possibility that the hawks need to talk about.
So obviously something that, we've talked about a lot over the last couple of months, and obviously now these officials are kind of speaking about it a bit more than they have. And obviously you heard there, and we know, as I pointed out earlier in this video, the provocations with China and the oil and the petrodollar and Russia and the Baltic states and Ukraine and Iran and Syria and Israel, Jerusalem. It's just too much going on. And it's all pieces on the chessboard, and there's so many pieces in play right now. It's anyone's guess where it's going to kick off first. But, we have some pretty good ideas. It's either going to be the Middle East or North Korea. One of the two. And then from there, all the other players are going to make the moves that they've been planning. So that's it, guys. I just wanted to bring all that to your attention. You guys have a good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and God bless.